Chihuahua is situated in the northwest central plains of Mexico, sharing borders with the United States, Texas and New Mexico, to the north and northeast, Sonora to the west and south, and Sinaloa to the southwest. To the east lies Coahuila de Zaragoza, while Durango occupies a significant portion of Chihuahua's southern border. Rancheria people. As the Spanish explorers ventured further north into Sinaloa, Sonora, and Chihuahua, they encountered a diverse array of indigenous groups. The sedentary communities in central Mexico resided in densely populated regions, engaging in permanent intensive agriculture and establishing stable, intricate settlement sites such as towns and cities. On the other hand, the indigenous populations in the northern regions, Sonora, Sinaloa, and Chihuahua, were labeled as rancheria people by the Spanish. Their settlements were typically dispersed over several miles, with dwellings separated by significant distances, sometimes up to half a mile. These rancherias shifted locations based on seasonal changes and soil fertility. Primarily, the rancheria people cultivated crops like corn, beans, squash, chiles, and cotton. Conchos. The Concho Indians resided in the vicinity of the confluence of the Rio Concho River and Rio Grande rivers in northern Chihuahua. This area, known as La Junta de los Rios, has a rich history as a farming and trading hub. The towns of Presidio, Texas, and Ojinaga, Chihuahua, are situated at the heart of this region. The Spaniards bestowed the name Conchos upon them, which means shells, in Spanish, possibly due to the abundance of shellfish in the Conchos River. As per Griffin, the Spaniards found the Conchos territory to be highly conducive to development, and the Conchos themselves appeared to have willingly integrated into the Spanish colonial system at an early stage. Initial contact between the Spaniards and the Conchos Indians was made in 1575, with Franciscan missionaries commencing their work among them in the 1590s. By 1604, the missionaries had founded the first mission for the Conchos, San Francisco de Conchos, leading to the conversion of around 4,000 Conchos neophytes. While the Conchos often collaborated with the Spaniards, they also engaged in conflicts with them. Presently, they are considered culturally extinct and are believed to have been assimilated into the broader Chihuahua population. Tobosos. The Toboso people were known to have settled in the middle stretches of the Conchos River and the Bolson de Mapamay, located in present-day eastern Chihuahua and western Coahuila. They were closely linked with the Jumano group and are sometimes considered to have been a part of the Jumano community. According to John Reed Swanton, the Toboso Indians were described as a predatory tribe living in the 17th century in the Bolson de Mapamay and extending northward at least to the Rio Grande. The Spaniards from the Espejo expedition to New Mexico first encountered the Tobosos in 1582 and believed them to be a relatively small group. Conflict between the Tobosos and the Spaniards had already begun in the 1560s, with the Tobosos raiding livestock and adapting to horseback riding. This led to the abandonment of the lucrative mines at Indihi and San Buenaventura, while the Santa Barbara mines became inoperable. By the 1590s, the Spaniards had initiated campaigns to prevent further livestock raids by the Tobosos. By 1800, the Toboso people who remained in modern-day Mexico had largely assimilated into Hispanic customs. Nevertheless, some Tobosos migrated to coastal Texas, where they settled in and around Mission Nuestra Señora del Refugio during the early 1800s. Suma. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the territory of the Sumas inhabited a range of territory that extended from the vicinity of present-day El Paso westward across northwestern Chihuahua, including the present northernmost municipios of Ascension, Juarez, and Praxitas G. Guerrero. The Sumas lived along the Rio Grande just south of the present-day city of El Paso and westward to the Rio Casas Grandes. Their territory extended westward from the Rio Grande Valley approximately 200 miles, 320 kilometers, to the present northwestern municipalities of Llanos and Nuevo Casas Grandes, Chihuahua, where the Llanos and Jocums ethnicities of northwest Chihuahua lived, which were probably subgroups or were closely related to the Suma. The Sumas were hunter-gatherers, with fixed abodes. The Sumas were hunter-gatherer nomads who practiced little or no farming. Devastated by smallpox, the Sumas entered the Spanish missions near El Paso and Casas Grandes and merged with the mestizo population, while some Sumas gradually merged with the Apaches from the north. They are now extinct as a distinct people. A smallpox epidemic in the 1780s killed most of the Sumas living at the mission, and they soon lost their ethnic identity. The last known man identifying himself as Suma died in 1869. Jovas. The Jova occupied the upper part of the valley of the Yaqui River Valley, including the villages of Bacaniagua, Baipoa Aparapa, and Setasura. Their territory encompassed parts of the present-day municipios of Casas Grandes, Nuevo Casas Grandes, and Galena. According to some linguists, the Jova were a tribe connected with the Opata and classified in the Taracahishan family and Uto-Aztecan stock. The Jova were seasonal agriculturalists who lived in the rugged canyons and mesas of the western Sierra Madre to the east of Sahuaripa, which is in east-central Sonora. The Jova were surrounded by the more culturally advanced Opata. The Jovas are an extinct cultural entity today. Jumanos. The Jumanos of Chihuahua resided along the Rio Grande, from the mouth of the Concho River to present-day El Paso, with their territory extending as far as Casas Grandes in Chihuahua. They are thought to have connections to the Suma Indians, with the two names potentially being interchangeable. The term Jumano was first recorded in 1581, and they are believed to have roamed from northern New Mexico to Coahuila, and from Flagstaff, Arizona to Peril, Chihuahua, all the way to the Trinity River in Texas. Historian France V. Scholes noted that the term Jumano was used to refer to specific groups of painted Indians known as Indios Rayados. Today, the Jumanos no longer exist as a distinct cultural group. Pescado Indians. The Pescado Indians, named for the Spanish word for fish, lived along the Rio Grande along northern border of Chihuahua and in parts of Texas. At some point, they were absorbed by other Indian groups and the Spanish settlers that moved northward into their tribal lands. The Mansos Indians also lived near present-day El Paso along the Rio Grande border area. In 1659, Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe Mission was established by Spanish missionaries for the Manso Indians living near present-day Ciudad Juarez. Coahuiltecan tribes. The Coahuiltecan tribes roamed through parts of Chihuahua, Coahuila, Nuevo Leon, and most of Texas west of San Antonio River and Cibolo Creek. They were made up of hundreds of bands of hunter-gatherers who ranged over the eastern part of Coahuila, northern Tamaulipas, Nuevo Leon, and southern Texas south and west of San Antonio River and Cibolo Creek. It is believed that the Coahuiltecans reached all the way to the Gulf Coast at the mouth of the Nueces. Northeast of that point, they were succeeded by Carancoan tribes. Toward the north, the Coahuiltecans were displaced by the Apache and Comanche. However, some tribes along the lower Rio Grande may have belonged to a distinct family, Tamaulipecan, described in 1864 by Orozco y Berra. Coahuiltecan shelters consisted of small temporary huts of brush or grass, sensible structures given their way of life and the climate of the area over which they ranged. It was the practice of the Coahuiltecans, or Coahuiltecos, to move from one traditional campsite to another, following the seasons and herds of migrating animals. During the Spanish colonial period, a majority of the Coahuiltecan natives were displaced from their traditional territories by Spaniards advancing from the south and Apaches advancing from the north. A large number of the small tribal groups or bands belonging to the Coahuiltecan stock remain unknown to this day, and even their locations, in some cases, are not clear. The Coahuiltecan Indians consisted of countless small nomadic bands, each of which was given different names by different explorers, a practice that caused great confusion. Estimates of the total Coahuiltecan population in 1690 vary. One historian compiled a list of 614 Coahuiltecan group names in northeastern Mexico and southern Texas. The average population per group was estimated at 140, giving us a population of 86,000. Little is known about the linguistic affinity or the cultures of the Coahuiltecan Indians because they eventually disappeared, having been decimated by war, disease, or assimilation at the hands of the Europeans, Comanches, and Apaches. The Varojeo, or Guarijo, Indians are closely related to and speak a language very similar to the Tarahumara. They inhabited the western Sierra Madre Mountains along the headwaters of the Rio Mayo of both Sonora and Chihuahua. The Guasapar Indians, also related to the Tarahumara, inhabited lands along the Chiniap and Urique rivers in Chihuahua. Tarahumara and Tepehuanes. Among Chihuahua's indigenous peoples, the Tarahumara and Tepehuanes stand apart, largely because they continue to prosper today as important ethnic identities, in contrast to many of the other indigenous groups which have disappeared as cultural entities. Both the Tarahumara and Tepehuanes are admired and well studied by academics who have noted their resilience and their fortitude in maintaining a separate identity within the Mexican Republic. Few indigenous groups in the northern Mexican states have this distinction. Exceptions would be the Yaqui and Mayo, or Sonora, the Huical and Cora, of Nayarit and Jalisco. The Tarahumara Indians who inhabited southern Chihuahua belonged to the Uto-Aztecan linguistic family and originally occupied more than 28,000 square miles of mountainous terrain, an area that is even larger than the state of West Virginia. Today, the Tarahumara are a people whose rich spiritual ideology and strong cultural identity have persevered despite the intrusion of foreign customs. The Spanish originally encountered the Tarahumara throughout Chihuahua upon arrival in the 1500s, but as the Spanish encroached on their civilization, the shy and private Tarahumara gradually retreated to less accessible canyons and valleys in the Sierra Tarahumara. The Tepehuanes Indians, like their cousins, the Tarahumara, belong to the Uto-Aztecan linguistic group. While their strongest presence was in the state of Durango and some western points of Zacatecas, the Tepehuanes also lived and hunted in southern Chihuahua. The Tepehuanes are most famous for their defiant revolt against Spanish rule in 1616 to 1619. The historian, Dr. Charlotte M. Grady, has discussed this revolt in great detail in her work, The Tepehuan Revolt of 1616, Militarism, Evangelism, and Colonialism in 17th Century Nueva Vizcaya, The University of Utah Press, 2000. Apaches. The Apaches, as latecomers to Chihuahua, probably first arrived in the area of Chihuahua in the 17th century. They were linguistically related to the Athapascan speakers of Alaska and Western Canada and worked their way south over a period of many centuries. By the middle of the 18th century, Apache depredations along the entire frontier region, including Chihuahua, had taken their toll on both the Spaniards and many of the other indigenous groups.